Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us for this afternoon's webinar, SACP 3.0 Rollout. I would like to introduce Jean Bambach from Consolidated Chassis Management, who is Director of Business Partner Relations, who will give us our presentation today. Jean, take it away.
Thank you, David, and to IANA for the opportunity to detail the upcoming changes in the South Atlantic Regional Chassis Pool. Let's begin with what is SACP 3.0 and how is it different from the current SACP operation? SACP 3.0 is the next generation interoperable chassis pool supported by the Georgia, Jacksonville, and North Carolina Port Authorities, the Ocean Carrier Equipment Management Association, which is an association of 10 major international container carriers, as well as Consolidated Chassis Management, or CCM. The purpose of the new model is to increase and upgrade the SACP fleet by introducing 60,000 plus new and or refurbished high-quality intermodal chassis to handle the international container trade to and from major South Atlantic ports such as Jacksonville, Savannah, and Wilmington, as well as key inland intermodal hubs like Atlanta, Birmingham, and Charlotte. Let's take a little closer look at the structural differences between the SACP 2.0 and that we will see in SACP 3.0. Both contributors and provider under the current operation are Track, DCLI, FlexiVan, and NACPAC. CCM has oversight management responsibilities only. Equipment is currently averaging 18 years of age. Location service will be rail ramps, container yards, and port terminals in Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Florida. Currently, the rental or user agreements are in place with the leasing companies as they are the equipment providers. What we'll see in 3.0, CCM will be both the contributor and provider to the SACP. CCM will have full service responsibilities. The equipment will either be really refurbished or new, and the goal is to have an average age of 5 years or less. Location service will remain the same, with the exception of the South Carolina Port Authority, and I'll address that in coming slides. The rental or user agreement under 3.0 will be directly with CCM as we will be the equipment provider. What are the benefits of the new pool? The pool is collaborative, supported by both the ports and the ocean carriers. Service delivery and reliable supply will remain as top priorities. Interoperability affords the highest levels of efficiency and sustainability. Billing, a single provider simplifies billing of chassis usage. Upgraded fleet, the chassis will transition to all new and modernized chassis. Competitive rental pricing based on a utility type structure offered under a published tariff, and locations will be the full South Atlantic scope of both rail and port facility locations. Locations we will service, ports and again, rail facilities within the cities listed below. I do want to address the Charleston, South Carolina off terminal at this time. I believe many of you are aware that the South Carolina Port Authority has created their own terminal chassis pool, and are in the process of leaving the South Atlantic chassis pool. CCM will continue to offer chassis for efficiencies and additional availability for motor carriers in the Charleston market. Here's just a geographic representation of the detail we just covered. Transition period and the start date. SACP 3.0 is slated to commence October 1st of 2023. Fleet modernization plan has begun and will continue into the 3.0 start in October of 23. New chassis are planned to be introduced later this year and will continue as part of the modernization plan throughout the startup of the 3.0 model. Engagement regarding the agreements with users is targeted to start later this year, but communications have begun. Contracting with the pool. In the coming weeks, we will be providing details on how you can register with the 3.0 pool, as well as the user rules associated to chassis usage. Motor carriers will be required to be registered as they are today with the UIA, and also to sign the CCM user agreement. All other users like ocean carriers, MVOs, BCOs, they too will sign a user agreement for chassis usage with CCM. We're going to take a little bit closer look of the use agreements. The current rules under SACP 2.0 are on your left. The future rules at 3.0 are on your right. I'm just going to go through the current rules, followed by what are changes that we'll see in 3.0, again, starting in October of 23. Currently, the pool is managed by CCM. Multiple equipment providers, Track, DCLI, FlexiVan, and NACPAC, contributed today to the SACP on behalf of specific ocean carriers. And those equipment providers invoice motor carriers and ocean carriers for chassis usage. Motor carrier has an agreement currently in place with the UIA for facility access and insurance validation. The use agreement currently motor carriers have signed with Track, DCLI, FlexiVan, and NACPAC really cover the rules of chassis usage in the SACP today. The UI addendum that motor carriers have in place with ocean carriers covers the rules for interchanging the container. Again, in the 3.0 model, what is the big change is CCM will become the single equipment provider and contribute all chassis to the SACP. CCM will also invoice motor carriers and ocean carriers for the particular chassis usage they are responsible for. And then lastly, motor carriers will need to sign a user agreement with CCM in advance of the 10/1 start date. All other rules remain the same. For additional information, you're free to visit our website at ccmpool.com/SACP 3.0 for regular updates. Also, feel free to email the address listed for any answers to questions you can't find on the website. But preferably, please reach out to myself or to Ken Talk so that we can talk through the issues directly. And our contact information is listed above. Just real quickly, thank you again to Ayanna for the opportunity. Thank you to each of the participants for your engagement and participation today. With that, we'll answer any questions that you may have. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Gene. That was a great presentation, very informative. I'm going to check and see what kind of questions we have coming in. First one is, what, if you can answer this, what is the price to ocean carriers and motor carriers?
That is still being worked on, David. We have to first secure the assets to understand what our cost basis is to be able to figure that out. So it's still being worked on.
Another question is, how will the last billing cycle for the SACP be handled?
It will continue to run through under 2.0 rules. So if a unit departs a facility prior to the 9/30 date, those 2.0 rules will continue until that cycle is closed. Anything that advances out gate after October 1st will be under the 3.0 rules.
And another question, and I think you answered it in the presentation, but how many chassis are planned for 3.0?
A minimum of 60,000, but I've seen numbers as high as 67,000. Certainly one of the fundamental needs is greater supply. I mean, we spent a lot of time over the last few years talking about it, but that is one of the initiatives to the new pool is greater supply, David.
And when you speak about the utility model, what do you mean?
Well, a great question. I mean, the utility model, as I understand it, is a supply of something, in this case, chassis, that is so important to the network that it has to be affordable to the mass or to the network. And so with that in mind, we expect that the cost basis of the chassis to be the best in that market.
Another question, how do motor carriers get reimbursement for when they must maintain a chassis while on the road? Example, when a tire blows.
Well, there are specific rules that can be found on our website at ccmpool.com under the maintenance tab. There's an OTR policy and it steps through the specific requirements for motor carriers to submit invoices back to the pool. And again, please, if you need additional assistance, hopefully you wrote down my email address. But again, I would be more than happy to provide additional information, walk somebody through that. But everything is readily available on ccmpool.com.
Great. Will there be a modernization consistent way that gate tickets are presented?
I'm not aware of any initiatives. I know that there are within various facilities initiatives that they are undertaking, but not to my knowledge is there any effort of standardization or modernizing how gate receipts are issued.
Another question, can SACP 3.0 chassis pull boxes from the South Carolina ports or just the rails?
No, they will be available for pulling containers off South Carolina ports. They just can't be left there. If they're left there, the motor carrier is responsible for usage until it's picked up and returned to either a start-stop location or the off-terminal CY yard.
What will be the billing cycle? Weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly?
You know, those details are still being worked through, but I expect that they'll be weekly.
Will there be a website where we can retrieve gate tickets, and what time frame will there be for historical data?
Well, those websites would be the current websites. I mean, we won't be issuing gate tickets, so you would have to go to whatever facility that you're looking for and see if they're available there. But there's no effort for us to be able to collect those and then post them off our website, no.
We have another one on, will the chassis be equipped with GPS or Internet of Things tracking technology?
Not at this time. That's a great question. Certainly we envision that, but the chassis will be retrofitted to accept the various GPS components and telematics that we envision, but it doesn't appear that it will be in the phase one, the initial start. Hopefully close down the road, but the chassis again will be equipped with the capability of quickly modifying them for those capabilities.
You are getting a lot of questions, my friend.
No comment.
Will the age be maintained with 5 years or newer refurbished, or just 5 years or newer at the rollout time?
No, it will. That is the goal, that we continue to look to turn the fleet over and maintain that average age. 5 years is the goal, to keep it at 5 years.
How many chassis will be available at off-site locations in Charleston, South Carolina, in respect to the other ports in the pool?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we're still kind of working through the transition right now. And I don't have a solid count I can give you, but you know, we look at things relative to throughput, various other metrics, that there's a need around the country for available assets. And, you know, we are focused on optimizing availability in all markets to meet the need. So I think the short answer is we expect to refine that number as we move through the transition with the South Carolina Port Authority, but it will be a number that provides optimal service levels, but doesn't jeopardize another market with excess equipment.
Next, someone is asking, how will billing disputes be handled?
You know, we're looking to be able to proactively take information from motor carriers and other beneficial cargo owners that hopefully could correct the problem before an invoice is issued. But we'll have a staff that is engaged at resolving disputes. You know, we're modifying the systems to minimize opportunities for errors to begin with. And so every effort will be to, you know, issue, and we think with a single provider model that the billing will be of a higher level, and errors or inconveniences, if you will, in motor carrier will be greatly reduced. But again, there will be a portal to proactively take information, to correct information prior to the issuance of the bill.
This next question is on a related note. Will there be an inspection form made available on the new equipment? Example, functional chassis get turned in after DOT inspection and later are invoiced for a chassis repair from the terminal. What check and balance will there be for this new modernized equipment?
No, I'm having a hard time understanding that question, David.
I think what the person is looking for is they are getting invoiced after they turn in the chassis. So will there be an inspection form that they use when they turn the chassis back?
Well, I mean, usually that in every case that I can think of, whether it's CY, rail, or marine, you're going through a fixed checkpoint. And that is the point where, whether it's a manual inspection or an AGS type photo, that the condition of the chassis is documented. So we don't look necessarily to issue a bill to a motor carrier. The process is we get notified that a chassis on terminal needs repairs to meet FMCSA standards. The vendor goes out, he determines what needs to be done to the chassis. We have people that do a subsequent inspection to validate what needs to be done. If they missed anything, we add to it. If they requested something to be done that doesn't need to be done, we would remove that from the job order. It happens down the road where when the invoice is issued to our system, the system alerts us that there is potential damage that needs to be reviewed for the responsibility of the motor carrier. And so from that, we backtrack to the in-gate documentation, whether it be written EIR J1, where it's documented, or we look at the AGS gate photos to see if it supports that it came in that way. And based on that, if we have a match, then a bill is issued in the motor carrier. But your first line of defense is always at the rail yard. The receipts that you receive, your drivers receive, really should be looked at for potential liabilities based on what the documentation says.
Another question: when will the chassis that are for refurbishment begin to be identified and shipped to facilities for work?
Well, that process is underway currently, where they're setting the network infrastructure. The facilities that will be refurbing generally are in place and producing refurbs already. They may be for a different component of the leasing company's operations, but we would have to secure the various rental agreements for the assets. But the process has begun, and we should again start to see refurbished chassis working their way into the SACP early first quarter 23.
Next, will the South Carolina ports send EDI for SACP 3.0 chassis, or will they be seen as truckers' own wheels?
Well, even if they are shown as trucker-owned wheels, we hope that those EDI feeds will continue. There's no hard or fast answer. 50% of the time, facilities, that's a generalization. I'm not singling out South Carolina Port Authority, but about 50% of the time they will identify the chassis, and other times they will identify them as trucker-owned wheels. And our systems have the capabilities of, whether it's part of the pool or not, looking at what we would refer to as rejected moves for various activity. If it's not part of the pool and somebody sends a CDI, we reject the move, but we still maintain a record of it. So that I really couldn't tell you 100%, but we would expect that the EDI continues to flow, and because they will become basically private wheels from the South Carolina Port Authority's view, they may also follow a similar format of about 50% trucker-owned versus identifying the pool that the chassis belongs to.
Next up, we have a question. If a chassis is unhired at the Charleston yard, can it be dropped off at another CCM location outside of the SACP? And what will the drop-off cost be?
Well, it wouldn't be outside of the SACP. It could definitely be outside of Charleston market, but it has to be within the confines of the SACP, and you would have to drop it at a start-stop location. If you drop it outside of the confines of the SACP, you still remain responsible for that chassis till it gets returned to the SACP.
Next question, will BCOs be able to be billed directly in the new model?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Short answers are great.
Yes.
Someone else is asking, If the inspection sticker expires while in the possession of the motor carrier, who is responsible?
For the inspection? Or,
They just say that if the inspection sticker expires while in possession of the motor carrier, who is
yeah, I
responsible?
mean, again, those rules are documented on our website at ccmpool.com. But in general, if the chassis was pulled off within a relatively short period of time and the FMCSA expired when the driver really should have gotten the box flipped to a different chassis, there are some cases where the motor carrier would be responsible because, really what you've done is you've shifted resources from the rail or marine terminal where they're needed to get the chassis available off terminal, which slows production and various other things. So, in other pool operations we've seen that I've run, motor carriers just thought, well, it's cheaper for me to, make them come to my yard to do the FMCSA. So there are some pretty tight provisions on when we will pay for that. And again, I would encourage everybody to print those details off our website. Again, ccmpool.com under the maintenance tab, or feel free to reach out. I can provide the details and walk you through them personally.
Just one or two more questions. What is the chassis use charge?
We don't know at this point. For the 3.0 model, under the current model, you would have to check with your whoever you have a user agreement in place with, again, Track, DCI, FlexiVan, or NACPAC. We don't know what the charges are. We're still working through our supply chain to secure the assets before we're able to answer that question. But again, utility type model really is trying to make sure that it's affordable to the masses. So I think that it'll be one of the best, if not the best priced asset in that market.
And just going back, someone asked tonight, when the price to ocean and motor carriers is determined, will those rates be public?
Yes. Yeah, there were, as I mentioned in the presentation, there will be a public tariff. Yes.
And is it possible for invoices, will you be able to see a list of each chassis signed out by a carrier and total days out so that the carrier's accounting team can adequately apply charges against the correct chassis?
So the question is, will at any time that motor carrier be able to see all the chassis that are in their possession?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that there will be an actual portal that you can, view that detail on, but certainly if there was a need for it, you could reach out to any staff member and we could provide that. I would think we would be able to set up a auto schedule report that, if you wanted to see all chassis in your control on a weekly basis, I would think we would be able to accommodate that.
And for our final question, what happens if I don't sign the CCM user agreement?
Well, we're working with the rails and the ports to enact gate controls so that if we have motor carriers and or other users of the equipment that aren't authorized to impede the release of that chassis.
And sorry, I told a little lie. This will be the final question. Do you anticipate lower migration to Nashville or Norfolk, et cetera?
I know that there's a bigger effort of the Georgia Port Authority to interface in that region, but I don't have any indications at this point that it'll be less than it is currently, David.
Gene, do you have any final comments you'd like to share?
I just really appreciate everybody's time. Please, if you could maybe back up to the slide with my contact information or Ken Talk's contact information. I just encourage everybody to write down the phone number and email address. And again, more than happy to go into greater detail on any subject or provide any additional information off the website directly to them.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Gene. Much appreciate your information and your time today. And to everyone attending, thank you so very much. And again, if you have any questions, you can feel free to follow up with Ayanna and we'll pass along the information to Gene or directly to Gene. Thank you very much. And everyone have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.